Stephen King, at the time of recording, has written over 65 novels/novellas, 5 nonfiction books, and over 200 short stories. Yet there is one book so disturbing that King himself has effectively buried it. This is the story of Rage. Be sure to stick around to the end because this is a crazy story. Published under King's pseudonym Richard Bachman in 1977, Rage revolves around Charlie Decker, a troubled high school student who takes his algebra class hostage after a violent altercation with his teacher. As the narrative unfolds, Charlie delves into his past traumas and grievances, engaging his classmates in a raw and revealing discussion about their own struggles and societal pressures. The novel is primarily set in one classroom, creating a tense and claustrophobic atmosphere that heightens the emotional stakes. Stephen King wrote a handful of books under the pen name Richard Bachman, complete with a author photo and bio. Under the Bachman name, he wrote stories like The Running Man and of course Rage, starting in 1977 and ending in 1985 when a clever bookstore owner solved the mystery. King's reason for this was twofold. One, he wanted to see if it was more than just his name that was selling books. Keep in mind that at this point in King's career, he was already a hugely popular name in horror, with Carrie and Salem's Lot under his belt, and the same year King started to use the Bachman pseudonym, The Shining would be released, further cementing his role as a master of horror. The second reason was less personal and more practical. He simply didn't want to oversaturate the market, which is really savvy on his part. Interestingly, King would make an overt reference to his Bachman days in his novel The Dark Half. The plot sees a popular author effectively doing the same thing, though with fantastical and horrific results. When I sat down and read Rage, first off, it's an incredibly unnerving read. Yet it's crystal clear that its themes of isolation, bullying, and trauma is not only timeless, but something that King explored a lot in his career. But it's also very of its time. By that I mean it's littered with pop culture references to stuff like The Exorcist and Starsky and Hutch, as well as older references like a character named Bates, a clear nod to 1960s Psycho. Yet in Rage, Charlie and even his fellow classmates are just totally numb to Charlie's actions. Per Charlie's inner monologue, he talks about the numbness coming from day-to-day violence such as extreme bullying in school, but also just brutality on TV and in films. While at the time the Vietnam War had been over for 2 years, it's likely that King felt like seeing this war in vivid footage on TV, sometimes in color depending on your TV set, was really scarring for a generation. Whilst we are no doubt to take Charlie's point of view with a huge grain of salt, King framing this kind of ennui and numbness in a post-nom America is a fascinating one. I tried really hard to find archive reviews of Rage upon its release, but everywhere I looked, I just turned up a dead end, which is such a shame because I think it would have been incredible to get a modern for the time perspective on the material. Post 1985, the Bachman era had ended, and King would never go back to it or use a pen name, leaving this as a really interesting and curious period in King's career. And usually that's probably where the saga would have ended. That is until some very tragic events put a spotlight on Rage. Just like Catcher in the Rye was said to be connected to many infamous crimes, Rage was also said to have inspired a lot of real-life tragedies. Jeffrey Lynn Cox, a senior at San Gabriel High School, took a classroom and his teacher hostage. Thankfully, no lives were lost, with one heroic student tackling Jeffrey and ending the nightmare. Cox was said to be inspired by Rage and had greatly identified with the anti-hero. Dustin L. Pierce, a senior at Jackson County High School, brought 2 handguns to school and held his class hostage for over 9 hours. Again, no lives were lost, and Rage was found among Dustin's belongings. Ryan R. Harris attended Stevens High School and entered a math class, forcing his teacher to leave and holding the kids hostage for 4 hours. Despite Ryan firing around the classroom, hitting objects, no lives were lost. Scott Pennington, a student at East Carter High School, brought a revolver to class, holding his classmates hostage. And unfortunately, this did result in the death of a school custodian named Marvin Hicks. In a really cruel twist of fate, Scott was upset that his book report on Rage was given a C by the teacher. A student at Heath High School entered a prayer meeting and injured 5 students, killing 3. In his locker was Richard Bachman's omnibus, which of course includes Rage. It's at this point in the timeline that King was moved to allow the novel to go out of print. The book, as far as I can tell, never got a standalone release outside of its original 1977 paperback, making it a very rare book. King was moved to quietly let Rage go out of print, and he has talked about this a couple of times. In a keynote speech at VEMA annual, he said, quote, "The Carneal incident was enough for me. I asked my publisher to take the damn thing out of print. They concurred," end quote. In the same speech, King admitted that Rage was born out of his own, rage, dealing with awkward teenage years, doing it all in a very harsh and forgiving environment. Yet King by no means is the first artist to fear copycats over something they created and then later try to claw it back. Ironically, King and Stanley Kubrick, who clashed over the adaptation of The Shining, really had something pretty rare in common. Famously, Stanley Kubrick's film A Clockwork Orange was withdrawn from the British release in 1973 at the filmmaker's request. This was following 2 copycat incidences. A 14-year-old boy whose name has been withheld was accused of manslaughter of a classmate. Prosecutors referred to A Clockwork Orange as inspiration, though whether or not this is true is up for debate. Probably a more overt copycat case, however, came from a 16-year-old boy who pleaded guilty to killing an elderly vagrant, and this is in direct parallel to a scene in the film. Roger Gray, for the defense, told the court that the link between this crime and the film Clockwork Orange is established beyond a reasonable doubt. Commenting on this, Stanley Kubrick said, quote, "To try and fasten any responsibility on art as the cause of life seems to me to put the case the wrong way around. Art consists of reshaping life, but it does not create life nor cause life. Furthermore, to attribute powerful suggestive qualities to a film is at odds with scientifically accepted views that, even after deep hypnosis in a post-hypnotic state, people cannot be made to do things which are at odds with their nature," end quote. Of course, years later, A Clockwork Orange would get a British release, so I was debating whether or not to include this section, but ultimately I think it's worthwhile, but I'll keep it brief. Apt Pupil is a novella included in the 1982 King compilation Different Seasons. The story revolves around all-American boy Todd Bowden, who blackmails an elderly, in-hiding war criminal named Kurt DeSander. Yet, it's not money the teen wants, but rather for Kurt to tell him all the gory details of the Holocaust that his teacher was not sharing with them. This toxic and strange journey leads both Todd and Kurt to further descend into madness and murder. Todd's teacher, Mr. French, discovers Kurt's true identity and confronts Todd over it. In an act of self-preservation, Todd guns down the teacher. Later, in a haunting finale, he takes his rifle and embarks on a shooting spree on the highway. Both Rage and Apt Pupil involve teachers being gunned down by a student or former student in the latter's case. Yet Different Seasons is currently, as far as I know, still in print and very easy to find. This isn't a criticism on King, but I thought it was worth mentioning as both books have very similar themes. It is also worth noting that the book was banned in some schools. In his footnote for his novel Blaze in 2007, King referred to Rage as out of print and having a huge relief about it. He has also written an essay entitled Guns, which he talks more in depth about Rage and of course his own feelings on gun violence, and all the profits from this goes towards the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence. While Rage is no longer in print, it remains a significant work within King's body of work for its raw exploration of difficult themes. The novel, by King's own admission, was born out of frustration and, yes, rage. Its raw and unflinching look at how it feels to be a teenager, but of course taken to a grotesque extreme. From page 1, we are in Charlie's head, forcing us to see through his young, twisted eyes, which really makes for a very unsettling journey. What we see in any piece of art is a reflection of our own image. Sadly, the reflection looking back for some people was one of destruction. I can't imagine the kind of weight this must have put on King, and whether or not you agree with his decision, we have to respect it. So I know this was a heavier video than I typically cover, yet I think the notion of art imitating life is an interesting one and one worth exploring. Having said that, the next video will be much lighter, so please subscribe and wait in the comments. All I ask is just keep it civil, y'all. And I have a playlist of some other Stephen King videos I've made, and I will see y'all in the next one.